Welcome, everyone.
Cheers, Steven. Nice to have you here. And welcome, everybody. Today is August. No, it's not fucking August. Today it's we're starting great already. We are months ahead. We actually are, but not in the same. Okay. Today it's April 11th, 2023, Process Guild, which is a part of the Singularity Net Ambassadors program. And today's session, we take some time to go over DWOC. Maybe first introduction of why we use stuff like this. The Singularity Net Ambassadors program aims to be quite decentralized, fully public and accessible program, which empowers community members to step up and engage actively, contributing to the further growth and development of the overall Singularity Net ecosystem. And for this, we want awesome folks. And if we want awesome folks, we also want awesome tools, and we want also awesome transparency and auditability on the whole thing. And this is when we started to work with DWOC back last year. I think we set up the Singularity Net Ambassadors DWOC for somewhere in summer 2022, when we slowly started to introduce the tools, figuring out as well how we want to use it. And DWOC on a high level, it mainly helps us to do project management by creating tasks and bounties in a very easy, understandable, and engaging way so that people who want to engage have an easy way to do so. I share my screen for a second. Okay, when we are going on DWOC, on the Singularity Net Ambassador space, this is where you will end up, the starting page, where we can see already we have several sections. Keep in mind, what you see right now most likely involves and changes heavily over the time as the ambassador program itself is in full evolution, and working groups and guilds appear and evolve as the ambassadors program itself evolves. If we would have gone back a half a year from now, there would be maybe just one or two spaces. Now we have quite a shitload of them already, which is really nice. How the thing works, the ambassadors program itself is designed on a holocratic model, which means we have several subgroups and guilds. Each of them act fully independent and self-sovereign, managing their own tasks and project management in project spaces. Let's first go into sections. The very first one, this one, we need to change the section. This is the Singularity Ambassador team task, captures a little bit general stuff where we don't figure out yet in which specific space we want to organize the thing. Then we have guilds like the strategy guild, the marketing guild, the treasury guild, and the process guild. We have the emerging working groups as well. Today, what we will do is actually really nice, because just in the call before, there was a request to add a new space for a writers work group. So we will set up the whole configuration all together here. And it's something really nice thing. Then we have a space for deep funding as well. And we have a space where we archive stuff which has been in use in the past, but not used anymore. So then let's say, for example, this counts only for admins. So if you're an admin, you can create all stuff here. Let's say, for example, in this regard, we want to create a space, which is called those writers workgroup. And we want to have this as space. Yes, right. Then it shows us ready. We just go back on a second here. This is now added in the guilds. We directly move it into the work groups. So now we go on the space. Most of you most likely already had some experience with Jira, Trello, these kind of Kanban boards, where we have usually sections on which you can create tasks. And then as they evolve, you move them forward from to do to in progress. Once they're finalized, they go into review, where we have a review and check of the completed tasks. And once they are approved and checked, then they go into the done section. Like you usually like to do is already I go on filters and I add the backlog. I save it for everybody. This is really nice because this allows us to create tasks, keep them in the backlog. They are not visible yet for everybody. And once the task is, let's say, really done, then we move it into to-do. Any questions at this point?
Yeah, Felix,
Okay.
where did the backlog come from? I didn't see that. I don't know that I've noted that before.
Okay, this is as admin, you can go on the filter, and there you can say, okay, which one of the spaces do you actually want to have added? By default, if you create a new space, backlog is not added. So you have to go on filter, then you enable the backlog. Once it's done, then you save it for everybody, and then it's added.
Actually, even before, the way I've imagined to do D-work tasks is not actually even do D-work tasks, because sometimes it takes a lot more time to do them than to describe what needs to be done. And sometimes it's just you reimagine what is created. For example, if you have a task where we have a bunch of tasks on the Miro board itself, one of the is like create the task process for writers workgroup and governance framework. And the first question I think we should ask is, what are the requirements to do the task? And then we get to brainstorm all the requirements, and that gives actually the view of what activities you may need and how to put together a task. And then it's up to the team. Do you even create like one task, or you split it down into multiple different tasks that, hey, this could be done by group, this could be done by individual? Because yeah, with this method, we are creating ourselves tasks on the work, but we may not still end up doing them, and they may be like scoped oddly, and it may not give the required context. But we used to have this, we still actually have the guide how to do task, although it's taken from the idea of problem first. So if you have a problem, you create a task based on that, and you describe how do you measure it, why you have the task. This kind of guide helps you to create the task and follow it, but the issue with that is the same thing. It takes just so long to create the task. And
then I think you're right, and good point, actually, creating a little context for this call here, because we set this up mostly to say we have right now 7 ambassadors. We expect a certain accountability and auditability from them. And the main purpose for this call here is to get the 7 ambassadors we have right now comfortable with DWORK. So when we ask them to track their tasks and engagements, that we know they know exactly how to create the task on an individual base, and just making sure that we don't lose people and they do not comfortable to work with DWORK because they simply don't know how to do. So it's really in this context here. So it goes much more to the role already to say, okay, it's much more for admins, not that much for applying to tasks or bounties, which is another part because DWORK can be used in several ways. In this regard, it's really for ambassadors to self-manage and create tasks for themselves, mostly.
So for the writers work group, it would be Kenichi. Is he would be the admin for that work group, Felix?
I think so. I think he has shown some interest in leading this, yes.
And maybe if we want to kind of focus on still on what can be done in DWORK, perhaps it's best to check what we already have and then go over why it is like that as it is on right now on the DWORK, or if it's done by somebody else, for example, Roger or Gran, or somebody has created a task, and then we look at it and see if we all kind of get the same understanding of what it's meant to be. Is it capturing the quality, the content, the work? And if it does, then we basically have that example and we are all in agreement.
Agree. Like, I think on this regard here for the workshop, it's not that much what you do, it's much more how to do. But what you do in debug, much more how you create your custom debug. I would love to stick to. Because like I said before, main purpose is really just to get the 7 ambassadors, which we have in place right now, on the same page and getting them comfortable. Because we have some standards, for example, for the title and stuff where we go later to. But you maybe I think what would make quite a sense is, okay, just doing an example. So for example, okay, we just created the path. The first thing I do is I adjust the permissions so that all the ambassadors add more roles here. We go back to the board. So if you refresh your debug right now, for example, all ambassadors here, Tommy, Tivor, Roger, Grandan. Actually, you can't see who's in the space here and in the call right now. You might be able, if you go on the space, then you see this plus icon in the top of each space. Tommy, is this working for you?
Yeah, you're talking about the plus to create a new item.
Exactly. When you click on there, this happens usually if you create a task somewhere else, can even be on our server. Just put this back. What happens normally, it creates directly template task. On the template task, we can see already we have several topics. This one for the title, for the bounty description. We can start directly say in which of the section do we want to have it appear. Usually, I recommend start with backlog, and once finished it and say, oh, okay, yes, this looks great, then you move it forward. And I show it by the example. You have a section where you can add assignments in this regard. So this will be most likely always yourself, because like I said, we really look on the individual tracking here. You can add a priority, which we usually don't really use. We have the task points, which is a really important topic. We have tags, which are really important as well. And we have the reviews. In our case, that's not so important. You can keep yourself there. Okay, and now let's start. For example, I say, create a. So in the title, I just want to make it really concise and easy for people to understand. Okay, what is the thing about? Why it is so important, we will see later as well, once we export the whole thing into a CSV. What we usually love to do as well, we add the date. In our case now, it's the 11th. It's actually just 11th April 2023. Date is really important, and also make sure to add the year to it. If not, we have repeating tasks. And we don't want this because next year we will have 11th April as well.
Just a quick question here. That's European date style. Do you want to keep everything in European date style?
Yes,
Tivo, yes.
Yeah.
technically yes, because I wouldn't be able to differentiate that easily if everybody uses their own format.
Yeah,
although, yeah, you need to take like only date is needed for the stuff that is repeatable, like create writers group space. I'm not quite sure you don't make that space every week, but there's something that is repeating there you can add. And actually, even if you don't add date, don't worry about it. We have automation that adds that date automatically on
Yes.
the date when the task was created, and that actually debug does export us as a activity list string which we parse.
And Santano, you wanted to say something?
I was gonna say maybe we can utilize, isn't there like a format? Isn't it year, month, date maybe for everything? But I'm also down to do it, whatever's easiest for the treasury to set up. But I think the format worldwide, unless I'm incorrect, I think it might be year, month, day. But I've been doing it, yeah, in the style where it's month, day, year, and I think that's the most worldwide wise, that's the most confusing, I think, for most people. So I need to change either way.
Yeah, I used to sort a lot of my documents that way with the year first because it sorts really nicely. But the problem is there's already been a lot of data already put on DWork. So as Tiva says, it would mess data up if we start putting in new formats. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And on the metadata, the title goes. So yeah, right now all the information on metadata is in date month format. But yeah, it's actually easier not to use it if it's not, if the date itself isn't important for you. Because based on the tooling we have now, it's just a button click way to automatically add dates to all the tasks that need it.
And also to the dates. Additionally, when you go on the three dots here, you directly have set your date. You have the calendar popping up. Just click on it and it adds this as well. And then we can see already, yeah, it's month, day, year, not day, year, month. And yeah, but it's no problem. Then the second part is the description. In the description, try to make it as short and concise as possible. In our regard, for example, simply, create a workspace for the singularity in messengers, writers.
Fun fact, we could go through all the warning messages we get from the treasury manager and that.
No, we try to make it so that we don't get the warning messages in the Excel manager, right? Because it's usually something that each time when we go in the treasury, we each time have some warnings and we can avoid some of them by simply doing workshops like this. So we know, okay, everybody's on topic and we don't have to handle that in the treasury guild. So then, yeah, that's quite all right. Like I said, that does not have to be a Roman or whatnot, whatever. Then in this regard, is because I created a stuff, you go on assignees. And when you go on assignees, everybody's on the space. You can see them already there. What I usually do is, yeah, I don't want to scroll through the whole thing. I just type directly zip, beginning of my letters, and it directly pops up here. I just select it. Priority, I don't need to set a priority. Task point is actually really important. And how we use it is one task point equals 1 hour. So in this regard, it took me 5 minutes. So yeah, we don't have to put anything there actually in this regard. Yeah, but which just like 0.1, for example, because it doesn't really take time, which is really cool. You can put date signals, right? So if you have half an hour or 45 minutes or whatnot, really up to you to decide this. Then we have tags. As this is a fully new space, there aren't any tags yet. There are only the default tags. What is really nice, it's really easy to create tags. You just type in whatnot, random tag, enter, and you have it already. Same counts if you want to take off text and later you can, or whatnot, you simply go on the reports. You can adjust the color to it. You can directly delete it or add the tag however you want. We will create a second tag later once we move it forward, which is a really important one. Then for the reviewers, For example, we don't have to add reviewers in this regard, once again, because it's meant to be for the admins and for the ambassadors. But however, as I, for example, I use TiVo, for example, to review the thing, because easier.
Yeah. One thing about these reviews, don't just randomly add people to review, and make sure they actually understand what is it, because review is quite a task, because whoever is a reviewer expected that they are able to also audit it, and and they kind of need to understand what was the call of that. So most of these stuff, because we're trying to run a self-governance, you audit your own tasks and activities. And that would be the fastest way we could get over. And we use retrospectives to see if this work was as valuable and this is the way to go through. And we don't really kill people there if you do something wrong or misbehave, but it's a learning experience for us too. But it heavily reduces the demand on the other people to kind of manage and figure out what they do.
Then, and that's it already pretty much. We can ignore the other parts here, because this is really like set for the self-creating tasks for the ambassadors, which have already the admin right. So a lot of trust is involved here, or trustworthiness, let's say. We have 7 ambassadors, and we want to simply get them on. So once all this is done, and this can be whatever, right? Once this is done, I simply go on create. Now it appears here directly. Now, what I do, because it's already created, I simply move it forward. You can directly move it forward as well into review. And then, even if the task is done, we keep it in review. This is really important. Never move a task yourself into the done section. And why is, we explain it right now. Once the task is in review, now we have the second tag. This is the most important tag actually on all the spaces, audited. This tag now differentiates, for example, after a certain time, you will end up with a bunch of tags here, with a bunch of tasks, some of them in review, and we pay out the rewards on a recurring base, right? Which are based to them. And once the rewards are distributed, then we move it into the done section. The audited tag is usually added by the treasury guild. And these audited tags are added in a live call in a recurring base where we go through all spaces, check is everything in place. Do we have the wallet addresses for the receivers? Is the task actually done? Is it reviewed and all the stuff? And then the audited tag is added by the treasury guild themselves. So what we do then is it's quite important now. And let me try to move this some windows away. We go on integrations, we go on general, and then we scroll down, and here we have the export tasks, where it allows us to export a CSV. We click this, we directly get now a CSV file of all tasks in the space, those in backlog, those who are in done section, and all the stuff. And here it also shows the tags. And the audited tag means, okay, this task is ready to be revamped. What happens then? Once we exported the CSV file, then we open Tivo's Treasury Manager, and we import the whole stuff, the CSV file there in the Treasury Manager. We transform the CSV file into a JSON file. The JSON file gets submitted into Cardano Wallet. In our regard, we use the Game Changer wallet powered by Jimber Labs Dandelion API. And which also defines then the metadata, which includes the most relevant topics there. And then we have this bridge from bridging community contributions to the Cardano blockchain. How this looks like in a later stage then, for example, let's say we go on DWOC, on Discord, we go on Treasury updates, where we have our bot. So for example, today, in the Treasury Guild, we sent out the rewards to 22 contributors. Now we have a look on this on Cardano scan. We have a short look into the metadata there. You scroll down, can go on the metadata. You open it. And this is now the finished product where the DWOC engagements, tasks, and bounties end up on the Cardano blockchain. We have the task creator in this regard. It's the Veritynet project, where we have a label, the operations, we have the contributors. Everybody here has a wallet. We use the last 6 digits of the wallet to issue like an ID for each contributor. And we have the amount of rewards, which are sent as well. This regard here, it was a bulk transaction to 22 contributors. When we go into the metadata, we have a bunch of receivers with different topics, with different rewards. And now we have a beautiful on-chain track and record of community engagements and contributions, which was literally done on DWOC. And that's it. It's actually pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And yes, questions now.
Which shows you that DWOC is just a front end. Well, the important bit is the CSV data. So if you can imagine any other front end could be used, for example, GitHub or Trello, or if you could write the code, if you can export from it in CSV. And this is why we need to think now about, that's the goal, is DWOC working for us? You know, that's the conversation, I suppose.
Exactly, yes. And a really important remark that the treasury and accounting system was designed to work with whatever front end. It's not important that it's DWOC. Like you said, it can be Jira, it can be Trello, it can be an Excel file, it can be a Google file, it can be whatever, right? As far as the set of the data format is the right one, like the CSV file, for example, we can fed it into the treasury system, transform it into a JSON file, get it on the blockchain, and in the metadata.
Yeah, I'm bringing up the Treasury Manager documentation again. And here I have this what data points go to metadata. So from left side, you will see all the stuff we actually have on the Treasury Manager, what we have captured from DWOC or self-created. But the only things we put on metadata for now, but we can discuss how do we improve it. Also, we can also update the standards, is group name, where it's coming from, task labels, and these are then tags or information from the titles that make up, like, is it operation, is it documentation, is it participation, all of that information. And task name, and then tokens based on like token ticker and amount of that. And finally, also, of course, wallet address to know where to send it. And this is the only information we use. On the right side, you will see the full information of metadata, and the green ones are then the same information on the left side. You see more green ones here because they are used in multiple places, both in the Cardano outputs and in the metadata itself. And then there are, of course, some of, like, for example, this message is generated based on aggregated information based on that bundle transaction. So there isn't a lot of information we're actually using compared to even our export Excels, which are available, have more information than the metadata. as for now.
I was also wondering about what we agreed upon in the strategy meeting about not having double dipping, and how can that be implemented? I talked to you, Tivo, about this before. How can this be implemented? Well, not how, but the how is probably will be figured out through the system, but perhaps when is something.
Yeah, I technically usually we this same call or these same activities we have done in every 2 weeks on Treasury Guild, and I also prepared the agenda for the Treasury features about that topic, like, because that is a very strong parameter. Although we can take this topic right now up, and how do we decide that no ambassadors will get rewards anymore, or in what conditions they no longer get rewards. And we don't want to get too complex, because else we just gonna create ourselves a lot of bureaucracy and configuration. So we need to just be clear that how do we kind of differentiate, or when they appear in the system, do they just perk up differently?
In my opinion, I'm with you on that. I would like to make it simple, and one way to make it super simple is just add in a tag for like ambassador work or something like that. And whenever the system sees that tag, then the system knows immediately that this is not rewardable. And that's like very simple, very easy to implement as well.
Well, on that case, usually when there is double tasking, for example, I do a bit of that cross community where I do something in some proposal or in Swarm, and then actually it used to be vice versa, that I prepare something in SingularityNet and then I also share it in different networks, but I don't ask myself task points. And I just say what I did, but no task points. So technically you can avoid that kind of double activity by simply not rewarding yourself with task points. Or when you do it, for example, you have participation and facilitation, then you do this. In that case, I would actually wouldn't be mind that you take like double task points, because they are gimbals, because they are two different skill sets, I would say, like facilitation and participation. But you don't give yourself rewards for participation, or you don't put them in title, and you only put it for facilitation.
Tivo, if you just if you just left the task points empty, that'd be low information. So the ambassador tag will explicitly give you that information on the ambassador if you tag it that way.
We also need the task points. That's relevant information, because we're one of the things we talked about is the weekly hours and all these things, and that's mapped one-to-one with the task points. So.
Okay, so yeah, technically this is not yet implemented in a way that it is mapped, but in order to receive the dollar rewards, you still have to put it into the title. Although, as we now this week will set up our own treasury system, we can create configurations that don't automatically apply to all other groups we are working with. So there we can start. But then we need to keep in mind and have some documentation of all the rules we are creating, because it's going to probably get quite messy, assuming the amount of people we have and the requirements we may have in different groups.
Question: the demo that Felix just did was on creating a space in DWork. And there's a subject, there's a line that last week said don't use because it doesn't export to CSV. I think it was additional work or something like that that's in the space creation.
Yes, that's exactly. Let's say, for example, we go on whatever on the spaces. And when you go on a task, you always have this possibility to create subtasks.
Subtask, yes.
Here.
But you said that
Yes, this is a very tricky one because actually it does not really work the subtask, because when we export the CSV, it does not include subtasks. It only captures the main task, but not the subtasks. So we can't record them actually.
Okay, but there's another option besides spaces, which is project, which you can create.
Technically,
Yes,
spaces and project are pretty same, except one has ways to manage the timelines of tasks, and that is.
Well,
Doesn't-
that's where I'm going. What I'm asking, if you could pull up a project. I've played with it a little bit in Strategy Guild. I think I have one project. And that's not the project, that's still a space. Or create a space, create a project in Strategy Guild, create a new one.
in strategy. Guide?
I think
Anywhere,
they
I
both
just
look
want
the
to,
same.
Okay. Okay.
yeah, I have a concept, I have a thought, and I just want to see if it can be done. And it's not a space, it's a project. There you go. Now, if we create, each of the 7 ambassadors creates their own project, if that's possible, and this all gets exported to CSV, can, for the month, we do a template and have all of the ambassadors' tasks and work in that project template for the month? Is that possible, and would that make things simple?
We never played around a lot with projects actually.
I think the project didn't add, it's everything is same, except you have 2 extra features that doesn't get exported. So you
Yes,
can even
okay.
turn the space into project, and you get these timeline features, which don't really affect, and the budget feature, which we don't use, and timelines we don't also use. So it's not really anything effective. Although you did mention something interesting, which last week I went over the deep funding Excel, and or like that could be quite a good use case to actually skip work, because there was a lot of like repetitive tasks, and you still recorded people who do them. And if we are able to link them with Discord tasks on that, then I can create the integration with the Google Sheet into Treasury Manager and skip all that work itself. Alternative option is where I'm going to is prepare tasks on Miro board and then integrate it with Treasury Manager, and then we just have like a way we visualize stuff on Miro board. And but everything I think should just be like case study first, like if something works on Miro board, it doesn't mean it's something else will work. Some will actually work quite well in T-work, or like example, there's participation ones, because then I don't have to know, people just can submit, yeah, I was here. But yeah, like all the internal activities and the works we just need to do in order to maintain or push out, and which are kind of repetitive, it's quite useful to actually do some alternative, to use alternative tools for them. Although if you want to collect activities, I actually started now also tracking my time on SingularityNet this month, so you can see how I have done it so far. So if I go, actually I should have it open here. Yeah, participate in Process Guild. So, and related to Process Guild, I have this activity list where I put all of them in subtasks. But the point here is not if there is something unique or like one of a very bigger project, then I have my own like task, create process for veteran translators. And that kind of gives the high level information on what I'm doing. And then below I do this unique stuff. Of course, the downside is that we don't get the information of what are these smaller things I'm doing, but at least I get like the higher level, and then I summarize it at the end of the like the task points.
But
And same with activity list. There are like a lot of repetitive tasks which are not elsewhere in the system.
But Tivo, one thing why I would really push back on this actually, if you create subtasks, it leads to that the D workspace over time heavily has overload and can't charge the spaces anymore. As more subtasks you add, as more struggle the D workspace has, just to open and to load.
Actually, I realized it may not just be subtask. It's about when you put in pictures and when the task amount goes around over 200. Because even if you create all of these simple tasks, it probably loads as much as that. So
Yeah, I kind of
that's the debug thing. It is not able to handle the scale of what we're doing. We need to always update our space.
I think Felix has got a very good sort of philosophical point here. That D-work is not for tracking your tasks. It's not going to be good for capturing what everybody does. All it's going to be good for is capturing the essentials of each work group, what has to be charged against. Anything more than that, it's not going to scale. So it's an ongoing, and actually even now it's not going to scale even on that basis. So we're going to have to be really careful here be clear to people, this is not to manage all your tasks. This is just for major tasks of a work group to be charged against. I can't reiterate that enough, actually.
Yeah, I think Stephen is really right there, and we have to be quite careful in the expectation management at this point. And maybe need to build some alignment on what do we actually want to track and what is the appropriate tool, because Stephen is definitely right. DWORK is not able to scale. It's made for small projects, usually to run bounties and stuff like this. It's not meant to be a platform which tracks hundreds of tasks per week. We will run very quickly into really strong issues there. And we might want to be careful already right now there. This is the reason also why we really look on alternatives right now and starting to play around on simply which tools, which front ends can we use, can be DAO-Lens, can be ClickUp, can be whatever. But yeah, DWORK is not able to scale, especially to activities like the Ambassadors program.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
A bit of an maybe a little suggestion that we can utilize for maybe not for every single aspect of the ambassador program, but for at least maybe for ambassadors themselves, work group leads, and essentially maybe people that hold roles can, since we are going through this idea of having everyone list out their contributions on maybe on a weekly basis or monthly basis for work and all for work done, we can make a use of coordinate if it's possible to integrate that into our payment structure. Where coordinate, where each person that is actually in the epoch can based on allocations or give allocations on work done. Everyone lists out their contribution for maybe on the past 2 weeks of the month and all. And based on that, other people that they've worked with and other ambassadors or other work group leads can allocate gives to each other. Maybe there can be a percentage of the treasury that we're going to be allocated for epoch. So at least that can be used to pay the role holders, and therefore people that are taking up bounties and likes, we can use DWORK essentially for that. So that way it's not it's not putting all the strain on DWORK or trying to use too many tasks and all. Yeah. So just putting that out there.
You mentioned coordinate, yeah, right? You mean the Ethereum coordinate platform? I think there is also that same issue that they don't provide export, or maybe they may actually have API. But then it's like, yeah, I don't know.
Table, you've done a fair amount of requirements gathering with regard to what expectations are, and not all those may already be met by the tools that we have at hand. Is that all true?
Yes. Well, technically, yeah, there is no tool that can handle it. But there are tools that we could use. But for example, we could might as well just use Excel or Google Sheet to do all of that. But there are no guardrails, so there isn't that combination that has framework and management in same place. So yeah.
And for me, the most relevant point is right now, fortunately, we can see there are a lot of tools and platforms which get developed. Even DWork is still a very young thing. I think they really started to develop, to bring it up last year. Why I think it's anyway important that the people here start to use DWork, just on this example I showed, is because it builds the experience and expertise for you how to use these tools. And this is really the most important one. What we anyway, the tools we need, we don't have yet. What we can do anyway, using the tools we have yet, and build the expertise and experience, which is crucial when we go in collaborations with our people, like what is happening with DAOlands right now, that we have the possibility to provide strongest insights on experience and expertise to make sure that we can ensure that the tools which are developed fits to our need. So really see it much more like a training exercise, actually. Because that's the most valid thing we can get out here. Since we use DWork, the most valid thing we get out of it from our perspective is definitely the experience we have now by knowing, okay, what tools do we actually need? How do they need to be built? And what needs do they have to satisfy?
And what processes do people do? What are the tools?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Felix. It has a lot of flaws, DWork, but it is really helping people learn, how to submit their project information, what a Kanban board is, how to move things, cards across a board to different statuses, and that's really important to learn. Ultimately, or probably quite soon, we might need to move to another user-friendly tool. We may have to pay licensing costs for that. That's another thing to bear in mind. There may be a cost to that because none of these tools are free. And we need to, so that's a separate conversation to have, to start looking at user-friendly tools that are more mature than DWork, that are more robust than DWork, but we may have to pay a cost for that.
Yes, very agree. And
okay, I just want to say that we should, based on a few other DAOs and other projects that I've worked with and all, I'll actually like we can explore the idea of the coordinate thing, because it's we can also add more people to it, like more. We can also, it doesn't necessarily have to be one epoch. Epoch is hard to say, maybe like maybe contribution circle and all. So it doesn't have to be one. It could be, you could split it into other, maybe for growth, for marketing, or you can break it down, or just have everything into one place and give an allotted amount of KGIX to be shared. But I don't think the way coordinate works is basically easy. Everyone gets 100 gives. So let's say, for example, there were 10 people in the circle, let's say 10 ambassadors or something, and they get or like 7 as ambassadors as we have right now. So let's say they get 100 give. Everyone gets 100 give, and they get to allocate that for like, I think like it's an allocation period of like 4 days, 5 days, where people get to put up all their contributions. You can see what everyone has done during the last based on work done prior to this current epoch, and then they give out those 100 tokens. So and choose to give everything, and choose not to give everything based on how much work you think another person has done. And I think it's anonymous in the sense that you can't see it until the epoch ends, and you can only see people that gave you. You can't actually see what others were given. You can only see what people gave you. and then you can leave notes, you can leave comments, and it's a way to like explain to people to like, oh, I like what you did. You can tell them exactly why you gave them this much or why you gave them this little. And I feel like it's a good way to like collaborate with each other. So it should just be another weapon in our arsenal. Technically, it doesn't need to be where we put all our focus. And we can also integrate D-work. I think I've heard some projects do that, where we can have D-work tickets, where we can actually see the work done. But at the same time, you should list it on coordinate, so people that don't want to like check everywhere can just go straight to coordinate. I'm part of this circle. Oh, I have 100 gives. I want to give this out. I want to give this out. And then there can be a payment structure for that. So that way, it's not just on an hourly basis, because someone can work for someone can do the same job for 20 hours that another person will do for 10 hours. It doesn't mean we should pay the person that has been doing it for 10 hours because can do it faster, or pay someone for 20 hours based on it took a longer time for the person to finish the task. So that way it's just I think it's a fair way to like push contributions or collaboration. So we should actually definitely try to explore that.
When looking at alternatives, I would love to introduce the mindset a little bit of, it's the same problem we have here, like with governments. We shouldn't be that naive to say one solution fits all. Does not exist, does not happen. We have, for example, in Singularity Ambassadors program, we have several guilds, several work groups. Each of them have a specific area, specific needs. And we shouldn't assume that we are able to find one tool which fits all the needs. In a later stage, I definitely can see it evolving, that this guild might use Coordinate, this guild might use Excel, this guild might use D-Work, depending on what best fits to their needs and their requirements. It's not, and this is how all the treasury system is designed. It's not that important what front end we need. As far we get the same data set out there, it doesn't matter. And I would highly recommend to not say, okay, D-Work doesn't work. Now we jump in and only look on downloads or only look on Coordinate. What will happen is we will face exactly the same issues, just with another tool in another environment. And we will end up in the exact same situation like we end up in with D-Work. We have a holocratic system in place. And this might be a little tricky to say, oh shit, we might not be able in a position to end up in a position where you say, hey, people want to engage. We have this single link, everybody on D-Work and engage. We might end up in a situation where you say, no, this guild has this place, this has this platform, this has this tool. But keep things small in order to scale. And as far as we get the same data structure out of the stuff, we don't matter if it's called Coordinate or DAO or D-Work. And it also permits each working group to decide which tools fit best with them. Not rules, tools. It's a thing I really love, actually. Let's not say, hey, all guilds, all working groups have to use this tool. Much more explore the tools which best fits to your needs and to your desires. And just let's make sure the outcome is simply the data structure. The outcome, what we get from it is the same.
I could bring up an interesting example here in case for the marketing point, because you're already posting Twitter. That could be a proof of work, and you don't have to use D-Work to say, hey, I made a post and there is a link. Technically, we could integrate Twitter or TweetDeck, I assume, too, and pull all the information you did last month, all the links, all the information, and we can quantify that into like the number of one is done, and like let's say 10 posts were done in a month, and each post is rewarded by X amount. Probably data would even give it even more information who did that, but maybe that would be then need to be done. But like the thing, sometimes the output itself is the thing you want to do, because in the end, what we are doing here is we are recording actions or assets. And if you're able to skip the recording part and and get straight just the result. And based on the result, we're able to, knowing where it's coming from, or knowing from, basically knowing from where to coming from, and if there are any rules, generate all the rest of the information of rewards, who was responsible, and what kind of information it was, we could put on top of that. And because in the end, what we want to do is automate as much, and just we do stuff, and the system is recording that for us.
And Tivo, do you think that what we capture in metadata is enough for what we need to capture in general?
Oh, no.
No, exactly. So there needs to be something supplementary to that, where we capture. You're right. There could be a generic front end to that. It could be any tool that exports to, but the other consideration is that it's not all going to be on-chain metadata, and that raises the question of where is that stored, and that's why I refer back to GitHub repositories there, because that provides an audit trail for data, just raw data. And then, do you see the point there?
Yeah. And actually, I do feel like that would be GitHub is perfect because it already has an API and it's open source somewhat. And for example, coming back to the last suggestion, like, hey, you have these Twitter posts and you want to record all of these and these public posts, these YouTube posts, what technically we could pull towards is pull these assets, get the map of that, and then post it to the GitHub and get the GitHub link as a proof of all that information, of the dump of that file, basically.
And between me and Andre, we have experience of doing that through GitHub Actions and so on. So it would take time. It would be a project, but what that would do would allow you to do different front ends, and you just ask people to export in a standard format. That's all you need. Once you've got that standard format, then you aggregate that content onto a GitHub repository, basically a CSV file, okay, which will then audit trail it, so it automatically on GitHub it would automatically timestamp it, and every action that happens on there will be, audited. But the question is how we go down that path strategically, I suppose.
Also, to the point of the metadata, I think actually the metadata is able to capture much more than it is currently doing. We spent now almost a year on only designing the specific metadata here, and we didn't even touch on the side of designing specific UTXOs for the thing. There can be much more done in this regard. This was, for example, really nice feedback on last week's Shimmer Labs when we introduced the treasury, introduced last updates on the treasury and accounting system. They gave the feedback that we didn't even tap into the UTXO design of the thing. We can go much deeper in the whole shit, actually. What we touched on yet with the metadata is actually a really small part of it, what is feasible. And it still needs a lot of time. We took almost a year just designing this metadata, which is pretty insane, to be honest. I love the metadata. I never rarely saw such beautiful shit around on the blockchain yet. But in the best case, I see also the metadata. It has nothing to do with what is on-chain history, right? And we didn't even build a direct link yet to designing on specific UTXOs or extended UTXOs, where we might also see what's happening with the input endorsers, for example, separating the transaction and the consensus values from each other. And there might be a lot of possibilities actually to much, much more with the metadata.
I mean, this may seem like a boring conversation, but it really excites me, because what is AI based on? Okay, how does AI work? It works on data.
Okay. Yeah. We just said it.
And not just text data, but also numerical data in some forms, depending on the model you're using. Okay, so if you can create a consistent base for that data in an open source repository, for example, then you can aggregate that data through AI front ends, potentially. Okay, that's not going to happen straight away, but it's really important from an imagination perspective is to recognize how important it is to build our database up.
Yes, we just had this morning a call with the Treasury Guild and so on when we did the transaction as well, where at the end of the call we set up an actions item in going exactly this, figuring out where are the best use cases by implementing AI into the treasury and accounting systems. So we definitely will have a quite strong focus on this, because yeah, when you say, okay, you go into extended metadata, you go into specific design of UTXOs powered or backed by AI, then actually the relevance of front end or web based stuff becomes maybe quite irrelevant, and you can do everything on the blockchain itself then actually only with metadata. But yeah, like you said, it's not happening tomorrow. Will take shitloads of time to figuring out already how to get it on there, but which is pretty much in line with as well what SingularityNet is about, right? Blockchain and AI, how to link the shit together. And treasury and accounting system might be a beautiful use case to explore some nice synergies there.
Stephen, one of the other things that's cropped up in exploring this topic space is the tension between auditability, public records, versus privacy, and auditability within a certain scope of visibility, where that scope of visibility matches what that particular organization or community needs. Feels like the core of the requirement around auditability. If we miss that need to support the right amount of transparency or the right scope of transparency, I think we might miss something. Thanks for pointing to that requirement about auditability.
Absolutely, Randall. That's a really big issue, and it's something that, for example, I referred to in the chat to Kenret's contribution system, which may come online through that was funded through deep funding, and that's going to raise issues like that. Like, if you're going to keep track of people's contribution, well, what about consent? What about that kind of thing? And also, it speaks to ethical concerns as well. As there's a whole it's a whole kind of worms in a way, but also it's an interesting challenge from an AI perspective.
And we didn't even start it with the really difficult topics, then the governance on top of the whole shit, right? Like, and then it becomes really tricky. So, yes. But for the privacy concerns, one really nice experience from using it so far, actually privacy requirements are not that much up to the treasury system, much more to the individual. And on the treasury system to define what do we use actually in the treasury and accounting system. In our case, for example, we use nothing else than the Discord handle and the wallet address. And we can even take off the Discord handle. We just need the name and the address. We can even take off the name. We can just use the address. And if you don't want to use the address, let's say, which directly refers to you as a contributor, you just name yourself however you want. You don't have to be Stephen QADO. You can be S QADO or whatnot, right? Just make sure you don't use a wallet where you have your full name as an ADA handle, for example. Just make sure you never use a wallet where you just do one single transaction between this wallet you use and the private wallet you don't want to use, because then you have this bridge to them, right? But privacy is much more to the individual, I think. Never up to the system. It's up to the individual.
Just on this, Rojo mentioned this NFTs. I guess it's a conversation to have with him, but I'm wondering how much information is going to be put onto that. Yeah, I guess I can ask him.
I think from where we ended also last week was the idea is the NFT is designed as an open policy ID. And we would be able to fed all the transaction metadata, which refers to specific individuals directly into your NFT. Let's say, for example, you are Cardano ambassador. a Singularity Ambassador, you have a wallet to which you receive your stuff. Like showed before and in the system, of your receiving wallet, we have the 6 digits, the last 6 digits of your address, and all tasks related to your wallet can be fed directly into the NFT. Which means anybody's asked, hey, what are you doing? What have you done so far? You just need to send the policy ID of your NFT, and through the NFT metadata set, you can go back into all of your direct engagements and participations. So it's a forever evolving NFT, which grows as more people engage and participate, which is actually a quite sexy thing.
Nice. Cool.
But yeah, now we are far beyond the workshop. But yeah, I hope it mentioned a little bit the purpose. I hope.
We need a Miro board, Tiva.
Yeah, today we went a bit deeper into teamwork. I guess that was requested quite often, that we go over this again and see how it's used, what can it do. And now we actually had a bit more insight, because over the weeks there has been a lot of conversations and revelations of what we are doing wrong and how should we go about this. And this kind of session helped us to kind of ground us that we are here together. We all have the same issues and we are all looking for the tools and building towards an easier outcome, that our so that we don't run or like get stuck behind the bureaucratic culture, but still just be able to just do stuff, those who want, and nothing happens magically, but that still make it easier to track what people are doing. We didn't dive into any of the task items, but I would remind that all the ambassadors on the work process quill, there are open questions. Describe how you became an ambassador, what would you like to do in 6 months, what is your relevance to SingularityNet as ambassador, and answering to these questions will reward you with 25 HX. That an aggregation of that information will be used to set the standard for the new ambassadors.
Maybe, Tivo, we can set a deadline to this one as well, because Grandano's suggestion was to have this ready for April 21st, when SingularityNet is hosting their
Decentralization Summit.
Exactly. And that we have something on hand to showcase there as well, like, hey, and also because it's 1 year ambassadors program. So if we could have it ready, maybe when it's, let's say, the 21st, maybe that we have it on the 15th, 16th,
yeah, I'm going to put
17th.
it Monday next process school, so that when we are here and go over stuff, we say, oh, this is the last day of shit. Go now.
Awesome.
Yeah, and final notes, I will be adding from this name list people into the work task, and I will be and those who already signed themselves up into subtask, I will make sure they're here. Somebody joined later and you don't see your name in the pictures, then simply submit yourself if you want to get the participation rewards. Today in the call, we mainly discussed teamwork management, how to create task tags, review as when task moves to done, how to create spaces, how to manage Kanban board, and a little bit of data documentation too. This was it for Process Quilt. Thanks for joining.